In a tense classroom moment, the Karen calculus teacher attempts to humiliate her shy student, unaware that behind his reserved demeanor lies a math genius ready to astonish everyone. The silence in courtroom 7B was so complete that Amanda could hear the scratch of Judge Harmon's pen as he made notes. She fixed her gaze on a water stain on the ceiling, shaped like Florida, she decided, rather than look at the jurors filing back in. 12 ordinary people who now held her future in their hands. The bailiff's voice echoed through the room. "All rise." Amanda's legs trembled as she stood. Her attorney, Diane, squeezed her arm gently. "Remember what we talked about," she whispered. "Whatever happens, we're not done fighting." The lead juror, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a permanently furrowed brow, handed a folded piece of paper to the bailiff, who delivered it to Judge Harmon. The judge's face remained impassive as he read the verdict, betraying nothing. In the matter of Davis County versus Amanda Whitmore, on the charge of criminal negligence resulting in death, the jury finds the defendant, Amanda's heartbeat, pounded in her ears, drowning out everything but the final word, guilty. The courtroom erupted. A sob escaped from somewhere behind her. Her mother, probably. Camera shutters clicked rapidly. Amanda remained motionless, feeling as though she were watching the scene from above, detached from her body. Guilty. The word echoed in her mind, familiar yet surreal. She had imagined this moment countless times over the past 8 months, but nothing had prepared her for the finality of it. District Attorney Preston smiled tightly, shaking hands with his team. His campaign for State Attorney General would surely benefit from this high-profile conviction. Across the aisle, the Sullivan family embraced, their faces a complex mixture of grief and vindication. Ethan Sullivan, age 17, honor student, math. Prodigy, dead. Ms. Whitmore, Judge Harmon's stern voice cut through the commotion. "You have been found guilty of criminal negligence resulting in death. Sentencing will be scheduled for 2 weeks from today. Until then, you will remain released on your current bail. Court is adjourned." The gavel came down with devastating finality. As people began to file out, Amanda finally turned to face the gallery. Journalists rushed toward the exit, eager to break the news. Through the crowd, she locked eyes with Mrs. Sullivan, Ethan's mother. The woman's gaze wasn't filled with hatred or satisfaction, as Amanda might have expected. Instead, there was something worse, a hollow emptiness, the kind that comes from a loss so profound that nothing, not even this verdict, could fill it. Amanda opened her mouth, desperate to say something, anything that might bridge the impossible gulf between them. But what words could possibly matter now? What could she say that she hadn't already tried to express during the endless nightmare of the trial? Before she could speak, her attorney tugged gently at her arm. "We need to go, Amanda, now." As Diane guided her toward a side exit to avoid the press, Amanda felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Sarah Sullivan standing there, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. "Was it worth it?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. "Your silence, was it worth my son's life?" Amanda stared back, paralyzed. The question struck at the heart of everything. The choice she'd made 8 months ago, the secret she'd kept, the price they'd all paid. And suddenly, standing in the aftermath of her conviction, Amanda knew with absolute certainty that she would make the same choice again. "Yes," she whispered. It was. Eight months earlier. Amanda loved September in Millfield. The tourists had largely departed, leaving the small coastal town to its year-round residents. The air held that perfect balance, no longer summer's oppressive heat, not yet autumn's chill, and the light took on a golden quality that made even the most ordinary scenes look like paintings. On this particular morning, Amanda walked briskly along Harbour Street toward the Millfield Clarion office. At 32, she was the newspaper's youngest editor-in-chief, having taken over when old Frank Donovan finally retired last year. The promotion had been a dream come true, though the timing couldn't have been worse. Print journalism was dying, especially in small towns like Millfield. But Amanda was determined to keep the Clarion relevant. The paper had served this community for over 100 years. She wouldn't be the one to let it die. Her phone buzzed with a text from her brother. Still, good for dinner tonight? Bringing someone special. Amanda smiled. Carlos had been uncharacteristically secretive about his new relationship. After a string of casual flings following his divorce 3 years ago, this sudden discretion suggested something different. She texted back quickly. Wouldn't miss it, 7 p.m. I'm making lasagna. As she slipped her phone back into her pocket, a familiar voice called out, Ms. Whitmore, got a minute? Amanda turned to see Chief Hammond approaching from across the street. In his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and perpetually concerned eyes, he'd been Millfield's police chief for as long as Amanda could remember. Morning, Chief, what can I do for you? He fell into step beside her. Wanted to give you a heads up. County's launching a major drug enforcement operation in the area. DEA involvement. Big press conference next week. Amanda raised an eyebrow. Here, in Millfield. Fentanyl's hitting. Small towns harder than cities these days. We've had 3 overdoses in the county this month already. He lowered his voice. This is off the record for now, but they're targeting the marina. Believe there's a distribution network operating through some of the fishing boats. Amanda mentally catalogued this information. The marina was Millfield's economic lifeline. Many families depended on the fishing industry, which was already struggling against corporate trawlers and tightening regulations. I appreciate the heads up, Chief. Hammond nodded. Just thought you should know before it all breaks. You've always been fair to the department in your reporting. As they reached the Clarion building, Amanda noticed a familiar figure waiting by the entrance. Sarah Chen, the high school principal and one of Amanda's closest friends since college. Sarah waved, her expression unusually serious. Looks like you're in demand this morning, Hammond said. I'll be in touch about that press conference. After he left, Amanda approached Sarah with concern. Everything okay? Sarah glanced around nervously. Can we talk inside, privately? In Amanda's office, Sarah declined coffee and sat stiffly on the edge of her chair. It's about Ethan, she said finally. I'm worried. Amanda nodded encouragingly. She'd known Sarah's son since he was a toddler, had watched him grow into a thoughtful, talented teenager. What's going on? His behavior's changed. He's secretive, defensive, his grades are slipping. I found cash in his room, a lot of it. Sarah's voice trembled slightly. Amanda, I think he might be involved with drugs. That doesn't sound like... Ethan? I know, that's what scares me. He's always been so focused, so responsible. But lately, Sarah twisted her wedding ring anxiously. Carlos thinks I'm overreacting, says it's just teenage rebellion. But my gut tells me it's more serious. Amanda leaned forward. Have you talked to Ethan directly? I tried. He shut down completely, said I was invading his privacy. Sarah hesitated. There's something else. Last night I overheard a phone call. He mentioned the marina, something about a delivery. The marina, Chief Hammond's warning echoed. In Amanda's mind. The reason I'm coming to you, Sarah continued, is that Ethan respects you, he always has. Maybe he'd open up to you in a way he won't with me. Amanda considered this. As a journalist, she'd built her career on gaining people's trust, getting them to share their stories, but this was different. This was personal. I'll try, she promised. But Sarah, if this is serious, if he's involved with something dangerous, you might need to go to the police. Sarah shook her head vehemently. Not yet, please. If I'm wrong, it could destroy his future. His scholarship applications, everything he's worked for. Her eyes pleaded. Just talk to him first. After Sarah left, Amanda sat alone in her office, troubled. Through the window she could see the marina in the distance, boats gently rocking in the harbor. If Hammond was right about a drug operation there, and if Ethan was somehow involved, her phone buzzed again. Another text from Carlos. Can't wait for you to meet her. She's changing everything. Amanda smiled despite her concerns. Whatever was happening with Ethan, at least she had this dinner with Carlos to look forward to. Family was her anchor in times of uncertainty. Always had been, ever since their parents died in the car accident when Amanda was 18 and Carlos just 15. She'd put her college plans on hold then, taking custody of her brother, determined that he would have stability despite their loss. She had no way of knowing that in a few hours, these separate threads of her life, her brother's new relationship, Ethan's troubles, the Marina investigation, would collide in a way that would shatter everything. Amanda was putting the finishing touches on the lasagna when the doorbell rang. She checked her watch, 6:45. Carlos was early, which was unusual for him. Wiping her hands on a dish towel, she went to answer. Her brother stood on the porch, practically vibrating with nervous energy. Beside him was a woman Amanda had never seen before, petite with dark curly hair and striking amber eyes. "Amanda, this is Elena," Carlos said, his voice both proud and anxious. "Elena, my sister Amanda." "It's wonderful to finally meet you," Elena said, her slight accent warming her words. "Carlos talks about you constantly." "All good things, I hope," Amanda replied, ushering them inside. She studied Elena curiously. There was something familiar about her, though Amanda was certain they'd never met. "Have you been in Millfield long?" "Just a few months," Elena answered. "I'm teaching Spanish at the high school." Amanda nodded, making the connection. "You must know Sarah Chen then. She's my department head, a wonderful woman." As they settled in the living room with glasses of wine, Amanda watched the way Carlos leaned toward Elena when she spoke, the gentle way he touched her hand. Her brother was in love, truly in love, perhaps for the first time since his marriage ended. The realization filled Amanda with both joy and a strange apprehension. Dinner conversation flowed easily. Elena was intelligent and warm, with a quick wit that matched Carlos's. She shared stories of growing up in a small coastal town in California, her voice growing animated as she described her close-knit family. "My parents still live there, but my brother moved to Oregon last year," she explained. "We've always been close, despite our differences. Family is everything, no?" Amanda smiled, in agreement, raising her glass. "To family, both the one we're born with and the one we choose." The evening was going perfectly until Carlos's phone rang. He checked the screen and frowned. "Sorry, I have to take this. It's work." He stepped into the kitchen, his voice a low murmur. "He works too hard," Elena said softly, "always taking calls even on his days off." Amanda nodded. Carlos had thrown himself into his job at the county prosecutor's office after his divorce, using work to fill the void his failed marriage had left. "He's passionate about what he does. That's one of the things I love about him," Elena admitted, a blush coloring her cheeks. "His dedication." When Carlos returned, his expression had changed. "That was Preston," he said, referring to the district attorney. "They're moving up the timeline on a major case. I may have to cut tonight short." Disappointment flickered across Elena's face, quickly masked. "It's okay. I understand." Amanda recognized her brother's apologetic expression. It was the same, one he'd used countless times during his marriage, when work inevitably took precedence over personal commitments. She wondered if Elena realized what she was signing up for. As they were clearing the dinner plates, Amanda's own phone buzzed with a text. It was from Ethan Sullivan. "Need to talk. It's important. Can I come by your office tomorrow morning?" Amanda felt a surge of relief. Sarah's concerns had been weighing on her all day. Maybe Ethan was ready to open up, whatever trouble he was in. "Office at 8 a.m. I'll bring donuts." The reply came immediately. "Thank you." "Good news?" Carlos asked, noticing her smile. "Just confirming a meeting for tomorrow," Amanda replied, not wanting to share Sarah's concerns without speaking to Ethan first. Nothing exciting. Later, as Amanda said goodbye to Carlos and Elena on the porch, she impulsively hugged Elena. "I'm glad he found you," she whispered. Elena's eyes shimmered in the porch light. "Me too. More than you know." After they left, Amanda stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching their headlights disappear down the street. There was something about Eleanor that tugged at her journalist's instincts, a story beneath the surface, waiting to be discovered. But perhaps that was true of everyone, if you looked closely enough. She had no idea that in less than 12 hours, Ethan Sullivan would be dead, and the choice Amanda made in the aftermath would alter the course of countless lives, including her own. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when Amanda emerged, flanked by her attorney and brother. Camera flashes exploded like lightning, and shouted questions created a wall of incomprehensible noise. "Ms. Whitmore, do you regret your decision to remain silent? Will you be appealing the verdict? Any comment on DA Preston's statement that justice has been served?" Diane stepped forward, her voice clear and authoritative. "My client maintains her innocence, and we will be appealing this verdict. We have no further comments at this time." They pushed through the throng toward Carlos's waiting car. Once inside, the sudden silence was jarring. Carlos pulled away from the curb, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "I should have recused myself from the investigation immediately," he said, his voice hollow. "If I had, maybe—" "Don't," Amanda interrupted. "This isn't your fault." Carlos glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his eyes haunted. "Isn't it? I knew about the operation. I knew Elena's brother was a target. If I'd told you, then you would have compromised an active investigation," Diane interjected from the back seat. "And it wouldn't have changed what happened with Ethan." Amanda stared out the window as they drove through downtown Millfield. 8 months had passed since that morning in her office, but the memories remained razor-sharp. Ethan, pale and terrified, confessing that he'd gotten involved with a drug operation at the marina, not as a user, but as a courier, making deliveries for a man he knew only as Ray. He'd thought it was just marijuana at first, easy money, but then he'd discovered it was fentanyl. "People are dying, Ms. Whitmore," he'd told her, his voice breaking. "A kid from Jefferson High overdosed last week. I can't be part of this anymore, but Ray says if I quit, he'll hurt my mom." Amanda had promised to help him find a way out. They'd agreed to meet again that evening to formulate a plan, but Ethan never made it to that meeting. His body was found near the marina breakwater hours later, a single gunshot to the head, made to look like suicide. The investigation had quickly focused on a drug trafficking operation led by Ray Vasquez, Elena's brother, though Amanda hadn't known that connection then. What followed was a nightmare of revelations. Elena had moved to Millfield specifically to be near her brother's operation. Carlos had been unwittingly dating the sister of a major drug trafficker while working on the case meant to bring him down. And Amanda had been the last person to see Ethan alive. "We should discuss the appeal strategy," Diane said, breaking into Amanda's thoughts. "The judge made several questionable rulings that excluded key evidence. We have grounds." Amanda nodded mechanically. The trial had been a blur of technical arguments, expert testimonies, and character witnesses. The prosecution's case hinged on a simple, damning premise. Amanda had known Ethan was in danger, had known about the drug operation, yet had failed to contact authorities immediately. That delay, they argued, constituted criminal negligence that led directly to his death. What the prosecution didn't know, what no one knew except Amanda, was why she had waited those crucial hours before going to the police. The real reason she had kept silent until it was too late. As they pulled up to Amanda's cottage, reporters were already waiting. News traveled fast in Millfield. "I can't go in there," Amanda said suddenly. "Take me to the office instead." Carlos looked uncertain. "Are you sure? After everything today, the paper goes to press tomorrow. I still have work to do." "Amanda," Diane began gently, "you've just been convicted of criminal negligence. The Clarion board will likely—" "Force me out," Amanda finished. "Probably, but until they do, I'm still the editor-in-chief." The Clarion. Office was mercifully empty when they arrived, the staff having gone home hours ago. Amanda unlocked the door, breathing in the familiar scent of paper and ink. "I'll be fine," she assured her brother and attorney. "I just need some time alone." After they reluctantly left, Amanda walked through the darkened newsroom to her office. The paper had changed in the past 8 months. They'd lost advertisers after her arrest, and the coverage of her trial had created divisions among the staff. Some believed in her innocence. Others thought she had betrayed journalistic ethics by not reporting what Ethan told her immediately. She sat heavily at her desk, staring at the blank computer screen. The unwritten editorial column seemed to mock her. What could she possibly say now? How could she explain a choice that had cost a young man his life and earned her a criminal conviction? A soft knock at the open door startled her. Elena stood in the doorway, her face a study in conflicted emotions. "May I come in?" she asked quietly. Amanda nodded, too exhausted for surprise. Elena closed the door and took a seat across from the desk. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. "I heard the verdict on the radio," Elena finally said. "I'm sorry." Amanda studied her. Elena looked different now, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes. The past 8 months had changed her too. After her brother's arrest, she'd faced suspicion and hostility in Millfield, despite no evidence linking her directly to his crimes. Her relationship with Carlos had imploded spectacularly once his involvement in the case became known. "Why are you here, Eleanor?" Eleanor met her gaze steadily. "Because you're going to prison for something that wasn't your fault, because my brother killed Ethan Sullivan, not you. And because I think I know why you didn't go to the police right away." Amanda's heart raced. "What are you talking about?" "The morning Ethan died, Ray called me. He was panicking, said someone was talking, threatening to expose the operation." Elena's voice was barely audible. "I mentioned that Carlos's sister was the newspaper editor, that she might know something." Understanding dawned, cold and terrible. "You told him about me." Eleanor nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I didn't know what he would do, I swear I didn't. But later, when I heard about Ethan," she took a shuddering breath. "And then, when you were arrested, when the timeline came out at your preliminary hearing, I realized. You waited to go to the police because you were protecting Carlos." The truth hung in the air between them, finally spoken aloud. Amanda had indeed waited those crucial hours because of what Ethan had told her, that one of the people involved in the operation was dating a prosecutor. He hadn't known names, but Amanda had instantly connected the dots to Elena and Carlos. She'd waited, investigated privately, trying to determine if her brother's girlfriend was involved before potentially destroying his career and reputation by going to the authorities. Those hours of hesitation had cost Ethan his life. "Why didn't you come forward during the trial?" Amanda asked, her voice hollow. "And admit I'm the reason Ethan died? That I betrayed my brother's confidence and got a teenager killed?" Eleanor wiped her tears roughly. "I'm a coward, Amanda, not like you." "I'm not brave," Amanda said bitterly. "I made a choice that got someone killed." Elena shook her head. "You chose loyalty, family. I understand that better than most." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "This is why I came. It's a confession. Everything I just told you written down and notarized." Amanda stared at the envelope. "Why now?" "Because I'm leaving Millfield tonight, going back to California." Elena stood, placing the envelope on the desk. "I can't undo what happened. Neither can you, but maybe this will help with your appeal." After Elena left, Amanda sat motionless, staring at the envelope. Outside, the sky had darkened to deep blue, stars emerging one by one. In the distance, lights from the marina reflected on the water, a constellation of their own. She thought about Ethan, about the future he would never have, about Sarah, who had lost her only child and still didn't know the full truth, about Carlos, caught in a web of deception, not of his making, about choices and consequences, loyalty and justice. Amanda reached for her keyboard and began to type. The words flowed easily now, a confession of her own. The truth, finally, about what had happened that September day and why she had made the choice she did. Not a justification, but an explanation. A reckoning. When she finished, she saved the document and sent it to the printing queue. Tomorrow's headline would be her own story, in her own words, her last act as editor-in-chief of the Millfield Clarion. Outside her office window, the lights of the town sparkled in the darkness. Millfield would go on without her. The paper would continue under new leadership. Life would persist as it always did, around the empty spaces left by those who departed. whether through death, like Ethan, or through the justice system, like Amanda herself. She thought again of Mrs. Sullivan's question in the courtroom. Was it worth it? Your silence? Was it worth my son's life? The answer Amanda had given, yes, wasn't a declaration of having made the right choice. It was an acknowledgement of the impossible truth, that given the same incomplete information, the same competing loyalties, she would make the same devastating choice again. Because in that moment, protecting her brother had seemed like the only option. The weight of that realization was her true sentence, one no court could impose or commute. She would carry it forever, long after any prison term ended. Amanda picked up Elena's envelope and placed it carefully in her desk drawer. Tomorrow would be time enough for appeals and legal strategies. Tonight was for facing the truth in all its painful complexity. The truth she would finally share with the world, and the price she would pay for having kept it silent for too long.